Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing amazing today. We have Roman armies and tactics, Praetorians. We're jumping in. We're learning. I'm glad you're here. Let's go.
On the 28th of March in the year 192 AD, the year of the five emperors, Roman Emperor
And by the way, I know you've been doing a lot of the Republic, and this is way, this could be jumping around the timeline. We're just learning.
Publius Helvius Pertinax was murdered after only 87 days of rule. He was assassinated by those who were, above all else, officially meant to protect the emperor, the Praetorian Guard. He had tried to instill meaningful discipline and good behaviour in them after their debauched and spoiled actions under the previous emperor, and for this he had met his end. What followed was possibly the most embarrassing part of Roman history. The Praetorian Guard put the position of emperor up for sale to the
Oh my goodness.
highest bidder. How did it come to this, and who were the Praetorians?
But who wants to get assassinated next? You can buy your position, and then you might get assassinated.
And their illustrious leaders? Welcome to our video on the elite imperial guard of the Roman military. The origins of the cohortis Praetoriae, or the Praetorian cohorts, first appear in the Roman sources as a reference to the vaunted conqueror of Hannibal, Scipio Africanus, in the late 3rd century BC. In these references, the Praetoriae were soldiers selected from the bravest and most competent of the legions, who were exempt from normal duties and received 1.5 times the normal legionary pay. In essence, these ad hoc assemblies of elite soldiers were rewarded for their performance with special privileges, and were in turn expected to personally protect their commanders.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense because Scipio's I think there was a guy named Metellus. I might be wrong with the name. That kind of helped level the playing field in Campania. But Scipio was really like the only guy that was able to match Hannibal toe for toe. And maybe not in direct combat until Zama, but in specifically in North Africa and Iberia, was definitely a Hannibal-esque commander himself. So they probably thought, we got to protect this guy. I don't know if Scipio that initiated this or the Senate or whatever, but they obviously had a reason to do this.
During the civil war after Julius Caesar's death in 44 BC, an important principle was established. A Roman general would always be accompanied by a bodyguard unit drawn from his most effective, experienced and reliable troops. After Augustus's victory at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, the first Roman emperor moved quickly to make the Praetorians into a permanent and established institution, initially created by the symbolic unification of the defeated Mark Antony's Praetorians and his own, who had almost all been Caesar's veterans. From the very beginning of their formal existence, they possessed benefits above and beyond that of the regular legionary. In 27 BC, Augustus had a senatorial decree passed that authorized the Praetorians to receive double the pay of normal legionaries. This was only the
You're protecting the #1 asset of the entire empire, so yeah.
start, and it was later increased to a ratio of 3.33 to 1. Upon their discharge, the Praetorians also received an absolute sum of money, which was similar in ratio to their pay compared to regular legionaries. The time of service was also different. Augustus fixed the length of time under arms for a member of the Imperial Guard at 12 years compared to a legionary's 16 years. In 5 AD,
Keep them fresh.
this was changed to 16 and 20 for each respectively. However, it is key to state that these were minimum figures, and the privileged Guard veterans often re-enlisted as evocati Augusti, a man recalled to service by the emperor.
Okay.
The figures of pay and service times were not static, and would often change during the turbulent times of the Roman Empire. However, the key point is that the Praetorians served less and were paid more.
I mean, look, guys, welcome to capitalism. This is, I know, but Uh, at the end of the day here, they are guarding the number one asset of the entire empire. They should be paid more. They should be.
A close formal relationship seems to have existed between Praetorian and Emperor in the early stages. Upon the discharge of a Praetorian, the sovereign would address them personally and fondly, stating things such as "courageous and loyal performance of military service in my Praetorian Guard." Another benefit which was bestowed upon the Praetorians were easier and special routine duties compared to the regular legionary. While stationed in their capital, their main task was to mount guard at the Emperor's home in order to shield the sovereign from harm.
It's like a combat-ready Secret Service, honestly.
Other important duties included the escort of the Emperor and members of the imperial family around the often dangerous city, acting as a form of riot police, and as a quasi-secret service, performing assassinations on behalf of the Emperor, as well as taking part in clandestine activity and subterfuge. The organization and numerical strength of the Praetorians were and are a matter of much debate. However, we do have some idea of the trends. In the early imperial period, according to Cassius Dio, the guard appears to have been around 10,000 strong.
That is insane. I was thinking like 200. Oh my goodness, 10,000? Now, they weren't just 10,000 people huddled around him at all times, obviously. They were probably a collection of networks. It was almost like a federal agency, probably.
And split into 10 double-sized military cohorts. 2 decades later, Tacitus instead states that the guard was split into 9 cohorts, which might imply that they were reduced purposefully by the emperor, or that a cohort had been destroyed in an engagement somewhere in the empire. The candidates selected for first-time induction into the Praetorian Guard were mainly 18 to 21 years old at the start of their service.
That's crazy, because I would expect them to be a little bit older with experience, honestly.
And drawn from the citizens of Italy. A respectable family heritage was a key.
That's also crazy. I thought they would be more Roman, honestly.
Key part of selection, and good character was also necessary for these elite soldiers. The prospective recruit would be required to make use of all available patronage and to receive letters of recommendation from any men of considerable importance that he knew.
I can see though, like the aristocrats, like getting, because of your namesake, your genus, whatever, you're able to kind of like jump to this position over having to go to serve in the regular army.
These aristocratic cohorts were at first commanded by an equestrian tribune, but in 2 BC this was modified so that the entire Praetorian Guard was led by 2 senior equestrians, known as the 2 Praetorian prefects. Under one of the more powerful prefects in the early Republic, Lucius Aelius Sejanus, the Praetorians were concentrated into one camp on the Viminal Hill, known as the Castra Praetoria. It enclosed an area of just over 17 hectares and included buildings such as a 2-story barracks having a capacity of around 12,000 men.
Yeah, that's very formidable. That's crazy to imagine, like, if you're a Roman citizen knowing that there's 12,000 Praetorian guards just chilling right over there. It's like having a fort. It's interesting times. This is August 2025, so it might be relevant. It would be like having a fort half a mile, if that, down from the White House with 12,000 active duty Navy SEALs or something like that.
The concentration of men in this single camp, rather than scattered around the city and country, also vastly increased the power of the Praetorian Guard politically. Inside this special force of soldiers were even more specialized units, employed for specific purposes. One of these was the Cohors Speculatorum, the
Spies!
cohort of scouts. In the Republican period, these were mainly army units which engaged in reconnaissance duties. In the Civil War period, Mark Antony possessed an elite cohort of this variant, which acted as his most elite guard and his trusted spies.
Yeah.
This latter role continued in the imperial period, forming a special speculatories cohort of their own within the Praetorian Guard. espionage was still one of the most important tasks of this particular unit, deriving from their ability to travel almost anywhere as formal courtiers and messengers of the emperor. At banquets, for example, they would patrol and observe the other dinner guests and their actions. At the games, they were to learn what was being said to who and
Such a paranoid society. But what if I don't know if we've changed much.
and report back to their master. Many special forces throughout history, such as the Persian Immortals and the Napoleonic Guard Imperial, were
Because I was thinking of literally both of these, by the way. And I'm glad he brought them up.
distinguished by their distinctive and unique uniforms, armor, and clothing. This wasn't different for the Roman Praetorians. Contrasting to the popular imperial Gallic-style helmet worn by regular legionaries, it is often thought that Praetorians would don the Greek-style Attic helmet,
Almost like a
decorated with a
centurion.
bushy crest and a distinctive browplate. Whether this was used for combat is not known, however it was almost certainly used as parade armor, for triumphs or for other great ceremonial occasions. The crucial shield which the Praetorians were armed with was also one possessing curved edges to create an oval shape, compared with the rectangular nature of the regular legionary scutum. One of the key features of the Praetorian armory were the emblazoned shields, which existed for various cohorts of this type. A combination of iconography and colours such as winged thunderbolts, lightning, the moon, stars, vines, crowns, and prominently scorpions all existed to give each cohort their own distinct identity.
Interesting.
For the protection of their torso, the Guard were likely armed with the iconic Lorica segmentata armour. However, on later friezes and inscriptions, they are often seen wearing scale armour instead.
Interesting. Like real scales? Like crocodile scales? That's insane if so.
When on duty in the capital and at the palace, Praetorians would rarely wear their armour and would instead don the civilian toga so that they might blend in more easily with civilians.
Makes sense.
For the first century of the Principate's existence, the Julio-Claudian emperors also employed a personal bodyguard of elite German troops for use alongside the regular Praetorians.
So the Praetorians are not the private bodyguard. Okay, I missed the mark there. They're a extensive outer shell of the bodyguard. Okay.
Called the Germani Corporis Custodes. It is believed that the origin of this private bodyguard was the Civil War period of the Republic, during which the reliability of foreign mercenary troops may have been considered more solid than that of Roman citizens, whose loyalty might be politically divided. The original tribesmen employed in this role were drawn from the Batavian units from the Lower Rhine, who were serving in the triumvir army of Octavian. When they were on guard at the palace, these elite auxiliary bodyguard units functioned as infantry, but they mounted steeds and functioned as cavalry in the field, and were always closely associated with the regular Praetorian Guard. It is possible that they may have intentionally functioned as a mirror and a counter to them. For example, when Caligula was assassinated, it was the German bodyguard who then combed the palace, hunting for his murderers. The seemingly spoiled nature of the regular Praetorian Guard might imply that their frontline capability would be limited, but this was apparently not the case. When employed in battle, they showed themselves
I mean, I'm sure if they're like, literally this is their career, they're going to train continuously.
as competent, well-trained, and well-led soldiers, as befitting an elite unit.
Yeah.
An increase in wars during the late 1st and early 2nd centuries
An increase in wars, as if there wasn't much of a time without war.
along with the increasing role of emperors as battlefield generals, made the Praetorians a progressively more commonly witnessed frontline unit, a genuine elite force. Their occupation of this increasingly battlefield-centric role during the 2nd
Pretty chill.
century has often been described as the golden age of the Praetorian Guard, during which they properly performed their intended function of serving and protecting the reigning emperor and his family. For example, Praetorian cohorts accompanied co-emperor Lucius Verus in the eastern campaigns of 162 to 166, and then Marcus Aurelius during the Marcomannic Wars, often functioning as a final elite reserve, much like the Triarii in the Republican Manipular legions.
Or much like the Napoleon bodyguard.
Unfortunately for the Empire, the ascension of Commodus as sole emperor in 180 AD marked a withdrawal of the emperors from frontline combat, and the subsequent power vacuum allowed ambitious Praetorian prefects to once again operate politically. In the eras of the Roman state during which imperial power was strong, due to high-quality rulers such as Trajan and Marcus Aurelius, the imperial power of the Praetorians was not as pronounced, due to its reduced ability or willingness to act in this manner. However, during periods of weakness, the prefects would often act in their own interest. This was the state of affairs which led to the assassination of Pertinax and the auction of the Roman crown.
How many times did a Praetorian Guard or a bodyguard assassinate an emperor? I think like at least, it feels like it would be at least like a dozen times, but I might be off.
However, this type of politicking by the Praetorians had begun centuries earlier, in the very earliest days of the empire. The first sign that the Guard had gained this kind of political power was on the death of Princeps Augustus. An oath of loyalty to his successor, Tiberius, was first taken by the governing consuls, then by the Praetorian prefects, followed only then by the senators, army, and people. The order in which these oaths took place indicates the significance of the prefects as the head of the emperor's personal guard. It was as if the senators, legions, and people were waiting to see what the Praetorians would do first before they acted. This power grew exponentially when the power of the elite Praetorian institution was concentrated into one place, the Castra Praetoria, and in one man, the Praetorian prefect.
Yeah, it seems like there could be corruption there.
Growing influence came to a head at the climax of the mad Emperor Caligula's reign. Disaffected senators, as well as members of the Praetorian Guard, had slain their emperor, who they had sworn to protect. It was a decisive moment which set the tone for centuries to come.
Yeah.
The Praetorians had now reached the point at which it was possible for them to become kingmakers in their own right, and they often did for their own personal gain. During the aftermath, a man of royal blood was torn from behind a curtain in the imperial apartments and enthroned by the Praetorians. This was the case with Claudius, and he was the first emperor to be made by the imperial guard.
I did not know that.
The myriad problems of the 3rd century crisis, external invasion, plagues, and economic crisis were exacerbated by the now routine process of Praetorian conspiracy. During many of these usurpations, a greedy prefect would lead or form a conspiracy to topple the current emperor and seize power for themselves or a candidate of their choice. Even the great Emperor Aurelian, who had effectively saved the empire during the ravages of the 3rd century, was assassinated by his own guard in the year 275. The ascension of Diocletian's Tetrarchy was the twilight of the Praetorian Guard. In the wars which engulfed the empire after the system began to fail, the Praetorians in Rome supported Maxentius and fought for him at the Milvian Bridge against Constantine the Great. These elite warriors supposedly fought so bravely that Constantine was impressed and spared them from massacre. However, he realized that they were a liability and did not attempt to reform the guard as Septimius Severus had done a century earlier. Instead, he dispersed the individual Praetorian units across the Rhine and Danube frontiers and destroyed the Castra Praetoria, which had stood since 23 AD. The institution of the Guard and its camp were at this point symbolically one, and its destruction showed the citizenry and the empire that they were gone for good. Our series on the Roman army.
Really good. Really good. The Praetorians, it sounds like they were just like I said, a federal agency almost of the emperor, an imperial agency, as you will. Crazy huge barracks in the city. Then you have like a Germanic private bodyguard on top of that in some cases. But the Praetorian Guard, it looks like it just got too big. It got too big. It got too bureaucratic. Maybe not bureaucratic, but it got too powerful. It got too powerful. And it just, it's a crazy thing. But then again, emperors are too powerful anyway. So insane. But it does make sense to have them as like a final reserve for these wars, because if they are good at combat, they definitely need to be in the rear guard. They definitely need to be protecting the commander, the general, XYZ. Well, thank you guys so much for watching once again. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, and bye-bye.